Hi, I'm Jay, and today we're seeing if we can take some classic streamer patterns and tie them as a jig. Stay tuned. And we're back. So, good afternoon. Taking a little bit of a break from filling my inventory just to do something fun. This is just, I've thought about for a few years now, taking some classic streamer patterns, some of those classic Catskill style hair-wing streamers, and some others that you find online, some of those main streamers, and taking those patterns and reinterpreting them as a jig. And I have a pattern that I think it's always caught my eye. I'm a big fan of Barry Ord Clarke. I first kind of noticed him mostly for his photography. I thought his flies and streamers, the photography was fantastic. But he's also a hell of a tire, which is probably an understatement, right? But there's one pattern that always caught my eye, and it was the Stingslid Bucktail. It's a hair-wing streamer that I believe they were catching sea trout. I think that's what the pattern is tied for, though doing it in a little bit smaller scale, or at least what I'm doing is taking a 1/8 jig, ball head jig, no eyes, and tying it in a way that represents that hair-wing streamer pattern, but on a jig. So let's get switched over here. And like I said, I'm tying this as a jig. So in the vise, we have a 1/8 ball. And this is a fairly simple combination. It's just a brown and white. I think in his description, Barry Ord Clarke has 2 or 3 colors, or maybe even 4 different colors. It's basically brown and white. I think in his description it was a dark brown, a light brown, a white. But first let's get this in here properly. And we're going to change up the materials just a little bit, though I do have Edson eyes, which I think on this ball head jig will work out quite well. I'm locking on a 2/0 thread. This is just red. I played with the idea that fly, as tied by Barry Ord Clarke, has a red belly, a red hook shank. I could have wrapped this thread all the way down, but I'm just stopping just like I normally do with jig tying. And to begin, we will add our darkest color first, which is a brown, a natural brown, something off the back of a undyed white tail would work just fine. I do have some nice browns on the back side of an olive and the back side of a, I call it root beer. It's kind of a cream colored tail. Basically a natural, a very light natural brown. Not tying this as sparsely as we would a hair wing streamer. We are tying a jig so the tail, the hairs of the tail do wrap around the shank itself. And for this jig, the tail will be the length of the body past the bend of the hook. I'll lock this on with a few wraps towards the bend of the hook and then cross over a few wraps back towards the head, making that nice V. And then we will give this a twist. Before we continue, we will rotate our vise. Is this still in frame? And on the hair wing pattern, this calls for a few strands of peacock curl right up the what becomes the back of the jig, right down the middle. And I'm just using the regular Krystal Flash number 15 crystal hair. You could use, basically it's just the black angel hair, Krystal Flash, whichever brand you choose. And it's black, and the flashes of color that you get in it, a little bit of gold, a little bit of green. We lock it in right down what becomes the back of the jig, right down the center. We'll rotate our vise back up so we can add our next color, which is just a natural white belly. I do think these streamer patterns would work great as a jig, particularly the patterns that represent minnows that we just have here naturally. You know, I'm looking for the patterns that are more realistic as opposed to, I don't know, things like a white ghost as an example, or black ghost rather, or Edson tiger, those types of things. You know, unless it's a trout pattern, a baby trout type pattern, you know, I think they tend to look unrealistic in terms of their color and whatnot. But with this pattern, the ball head without the eye kind of, to me, in my, as I look at that streamer, you know, the streamer is tied with a nice head of black thread right up near the eye of the hook. And so with this interpretation, you know, we're using that ball head to represent the thread head on a streamer. And I am using the 2/0 thread. I'm trying to not build up too much of a collar because this does have a lot of extra steps. We've added the black tinsel. Now I'm going to add a couple strands of gold Flashabou right down each side. And I think 3 would be the perfect amount. So this is just a gold Flashabou 6902. Put 3 strands down each side, right down the lateral line. A couple wraps to lock it into place. And I want the Flashabou and the Krystal Flash top wing to only be the length of the tail. I don't want it to extend past the end of the tail at all. A little bit shy would be okay as well. And again, right down that center line. Couple wraps to lock it in. And if I finish the head at this point, this is a pretty jig. This is sharp looking as it is. But Barry Ord Clarke uses Edson eyes, which I actually have some. And they're just a brass spoon. Gold spoon, cupped on the inside. And they do have a tab on it. That's from the, their stamping process. So I will need, do I have? Bear with me. Just need some wire cutters. I will be right back. We might edit that part out as I jumped out of my chair and jumped back. Maybe we'll leave it in, I don't know. But let's see. So I'm just holding that tab, just holding onto the tab just to look to see where I'm going to place that. I want to cut this rectangle part off and leave enough of that spoon handle to tie it in, but I don't want it to be too long. Ideally, the tip of the spoon will start right at the end of the collar. So we'll give it a little nip. And this is brass. It's not terribly hard to cut. But we will lay it right into place. Just a few wraps to lock it in place. And this is where you'll really see, if I was using a thicker thread, the collar would look quite thick. So I'm using the thinnest thread that I could get away with, tying a jig of this size. These little pieces do put your dexterity to the test. This is a pretty jig. Make sure that your eyes are straight. How do we look so far? So to finish this off, I'm just going to take a loop of a different color, size A thread, just to do a quick whip finish on this. The Edson eyes being brass, they are fairly thin, so if they do add any type of weight, I don't believe it's enough to really change the way this jig works, the weight forward head. Get everything centered. That is an interesting, very minnow-like. Let's take a look at this. Let me turn my face off. So this will be very minnow-like. I really like the way this turned out. I do think using the 2/0 thread will make a difference, did make a difference in having a nice small collar. So this is a pattern called the Stingslid Bucktail Streamer. If you want to see more of Barry Ord Clarke's flies and streamers, go to the featherbender.com. Oop, let's finish this real quick. And like I said, I've always been impressed with his photography. Always been a fan of the photography, and that's what initially caught my eye as you know, surf the web and find different jigs and flies and streamers. Different things that I was, you know, just going down different rabbit holes and learning about different things. Barry Ord Clarke has a few books on fly tying. They're all very well done. But I think, how'd we do? That's a fantastic looking jig. Let's take one last look at this. So on the monitor, this looks great. The Edson eye really stands out. I'm sure that once this is in the water and it compacts down slightly, you know, as it gets wet, that will look like a minnow to me, right? Very pretty jig. I like that. I think that's going to do it for us today. So I think over the next few months, I'm going to have a little bit of fun looking at some of these traditional hair wing streamers, looking at some of the trolling streamers tied and fished with farther north in Maine and New England states, and seeing how these patterns translate into a jig type pattern. It's interesting to me. I had fun tying this one, and it's a pretty pattern. I really like what we were able to do here today. But I think that's going to do it for us today. As always, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any new content. Feel free to share any of our videos, as it does help increase awareness for the channel. Check out the website, jworthhandtied.com. If we get a few of these different patterns tied up, I might add some of those to the website as well. But I think that's doing it for us today. Until next time, guys, keep tying in tight lines.